Hello. Assalamu alaikum to the literati of Lahore. It's a great pleasure to see you all here. Now, we are waiting for Aitzaz Ahsan, who's sitting in the green room, to arrive. So we'll give it a few minutes. I'm really sorry about the delay. I've come from London, so I'm very punctual. But I understand this is Pakistan, and this is how things happen here. And it has its own warmth, so it's all good. When I come to Pakistan, I'm prepared for absolutely anything, and usually anything happens. Never, never. मेरा नाम है हुमा प्राइस और ये किताब मैंने लिखी है अ लव लेटर टू मेन एंड वुमेन। एक शेर से शुरू करूँगी जो मैं एतजाज़ जी के नाम करती हूँ। उनका जो काम है अहले सियासत जाने, उनका जो काम है अहले सियासत जाने, मेरा पैगाम मोहब्बत है जहाँ तक पहुँचे। Well, welcome to this book launch session, A Love Letter to Men and Women. We'll talk about this book in a moment, but first I have some good news and I have some bad news. The bad news is that the moderator of this session, Tawseeq Haider, for some reason has gone off to England. So I was left without a moderator. So I decided I'm going to run the session myself. I've done this enough times. And it's very rare that I get two such amazing people sitting next to me, the awesome twosome, I would call them. Chaudhry Aitzaz Ahsan, who's a barrister, politician, Justice Nasira Iqbal, who's been a former judge. In fact, right now there are two barristers and a judge, so we could hold a court session here. So if anybody has any outstanding cases, please do bring them forward. I'm not really an author, I'm a practicing barrister in England, and I practice family law. I really don't think that I need to introduce these two incredible people, jaise chand ko chirag dikhana hoga. Before I start, I also want to thank Razi and the LLF for giving me this privilege of launching my book via this amazing festival. I am truly humbled, and thank you so much, Razi. If I could just explain a little bit about the book. As I said, I'm a barrister. I'm not a social scientist. So social scientists look at issues as abstract ideas and deal with it very academically. I deal with real people in my practice as a barrister, and I see real issues happening on the ground, which are not always the same if you talk about them academically. What happened was I read this research, which has been going on at Harvard for the last 80 years, and it's a research that has found that our health, mental and physical health, is dependent upon the quality of our personal relationships. And if the quality of our personal relationships is good, then we have good mental and physical health, and we live longer. Now, I had to balance this research against the clients that I met, most of whom were very, very unhappy. And I had to see what I can do to make their lives better. So, how many people here understand what intelligence is? Who knows what intelligence is? Nasira ji, aapka kya khayal hai? Intelligence kya hota hai? Sorry?
What does it mean?
That's a different type of intelligence. मैं जहानत की बात कर रही हूँ, जहानत जिससे हम लोग कॉलेजेस में जाकर डिग्रीज हासिल करते हैं, लॉयर्स बनते हैं, डॉक्टर्स बनते हैं.
I think intelligence means mind over matter.
Mind over matter, intelligence.
That's how it should be. But unfortunately, these days we don't know whether it's matter over mind or otherwise.
अब एक सवाल इत्तेज़ाज़ जी मेरा आपसे है. Can you explain to the audience what emotional intelligence is?
What?
Emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, as per your work and your book, is basically knowledge that one would have obtained, the intelligence being knowledge, which has been turned over or affected or disfigured by emotional.
That's really good. Does anybody else have a definition of emotional intelligence? Have you ever heard of the term emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is the intelligence we use in our relationships, in assessing our own emotions and responding to other people's emotions intelligently and with empathy. And emotional intelligence is what makes our relationships successful. So this book is all about emotional intelligence and how to make all our relationships successful. So I'm going to turn to Nasira ji first and ask her which parts of the book she would like to talk about.
First of all, I must confess the book is 400 pages long. And I've skimmed through it only yesterday and today. So I hope you'll overcome my shortcomings, rather ignore my shortcomings. I really looked at the two chapters which deal with women. One is called misogyny and the other is called patriarchy. And that's where you have dealt with men's attitude to women mostly. But I find that Huma Price migrated from what was then India to the United Kingdom when she was 11 years old. And unfortunately, there was some kind of problems between her parents also. So she had probably spent her childhood examining the kind of situation that she was in with her mother and father not really getting on very well. And then she did her bar at law from London, and she did her LLB honors, and she started practicing family law as she just mentioned. But the strange thing is, the cases that come to her are mostly about couples who are not getting on very well. And here she has written the book in which she is trying to guide people to get on well, and she has dedicated it primarily to Jacinda Ardern, which I think is marvelous. And she has said in the opening of the book that actions that we all undertake should be conducted with kindness and compassion. And I think that's a great message. But if Huma is going to take that message, either she can take her practice forward or she can take the book forward. Both things are going to be difficult.
Well, I reckon if people read my book, I'd be out of a job because they wouldn't need to go to court and separate.
Right.
So I would like people to read the book because I've nearly retired now anyway.
You're too young to retire. I
Thank
think
you.
you're just in the
Thank
prime
you.
of your career.
Thank you.
And you're doing very well. I have seen you in the courts.
Thank you so much. Aitzaz ji, could I ask you if you've had a chance to look through the book? I know you received it very, very recently.
No, I can say that I've been through the book.
You have? 400 pages, like Nasira ji said?
400 pages. But
Anything that struck out at you in it?
no, it's a very interesting book. It's a very a book dense with facts and with episodes from history, in legal studies of people and their situations, in history. So some of the great characters of history of not just Europe or England, but of South Asia, of other parts of the world are actually analyze under different topics. And an interesting aspect of it is that she discusses two concepts which are underexposed these days, and which we don't speak of. We speak of misogyny, we speak of feminism. She discusses those very comprehensively, and with the kind of brazenness of pen, which you'll understand from the name that I'm going to take after this, the brazenness of pen that is the pen of a Germaine Greer. The only thing is she is a Pakistani and can't be as bold as Germaine, but the relationships of between men and women, and something the word I was trying to get to, and I got to, is another, there are concepts which at least I had not pondered over earlier in my life, in my reading of books, in my, for misandry, for instance, is a state of mind where women just don't believe that they are equal to men or even superior to men. They just hate men. And this is a kind of attitude that I was certainly impressed by. It is a very dense, I would recommend all of you to read it. It opens up your mind to many concepts. It opens up your mind. It's a consultation with a consultant on life, and if you are in a difficult situation, you go to a shrink for consultation. Husband and wife get advice. But while it is a serious book, I have one observation on it. It is a very serious book with the most non-serious of titles. A love letter to men and women. What is, it could have been a study of women, a study of woman.
But it's not a study of women. It's not a study of men. It's a message for men and women to love each other. Because, you see, my starting point is that men and women's natural inclination is to love each other, not hate each other. That's the natural inclination. And when I talk about love, I'm not talking about Romeo, Juliet, Layla, Majnu type of love at all. I'm talking about a very different type of love, which is logical and rational. It's the kind of love where parents who love their children send them abroad to study far away from themselves, because that's what's good for the child. So that's the kind of love I'm talking about. So I feel that we need to accept that men and women are not at their natural place where they should just love each other. We need to accept that there is a lot of problem going on, and although the tendency is to sweep problems under the carpet, I can tell you as a practicing barrister in England that 10 years ago, divorce rate was 2% in the Asian community, and now it's 20%. So it's gone up quite a lot. And instead of denying that, we need to address it. The other thing we need to stop doing is judging and labeling each other. Men and women have to stop calling each other names. He's a chauvinist, she's a feminist, she's this, she's that. He's this, he's that. We need to think more deeply. So what I've actually done in the book is, I have put, and the reason it's called A Love Letter to Men and Women is because I wanted to include men. I've grown up in England, and the feminism that I have studied is based on men supporting women to achieve equal rights and equal opportunities. For example, the suffragettes, when they started their movement in England, all the men at that time who were powerful supported them, and that's how Western women achieved a lot of rights, because they were supported by the men. That's why it's very important for me to include men in any discussion on women. So what I have done in this book, I've treated both equally. I've put men and women in their physiological, psychological, cultural, historical, and geographical context to explain why we have arrived where we have arrived. And each chapter explains that. I've also tried to demystify certain terms that we hear. For example, terms like patriarchy, I find that in developing societies is very misunderstood. The way I understand patriarchy, it doesn't mean misogyny. Patriarchy essentially means men protect and provide for women. And usually there's a very good physical reason for this. Women get pregnant and have babies, so they need the father of the child to protect them. That's patriarchy. It usually takes place with the consent of women. Now, misogyny is totally different. Misogyny is men controlling women and preventing them from achieving their rights. So it was very important for me to make the distinction, because what we need to do is stop putting down women who want to be homemakers and who want to look after their homes and children. We can't put everything next to how much someone's earning power is. We can't be monetary about everything. And when I look back at my grandparents, my grandfathers were providers and protectors, and my grandmothers were homemakers, and they both had equal respect in society. They were both seen as fulfilling a very important role. So it's important to make that distinction. And also, when I look at the distinction of feminism in developing countries, it seems very much that feminism is women wearing Western clothes, smoking, drinking, doing what they like. That's not feminism. Feminism is every little girl having the opportunity to go to school and everyone having the opportunity to go to work. Whether she wants to or not, or whether she has other responsibilities, is a different matter. Nasira ji, you read some of the chapter on feminism. Could I invite you to say something about that, please?
Well, some of the new words I've learned from your book, for one thing. My English is not that good.
Your English is excellent.
I know Punjabi well, it's my mother tongue, and Urdu because it's our national language. For instance, this word phylogeny and the word Aitzaz referred to
misandry.
Misandry. I had never heard these words. So at least it added to my knowledge or my vocabulary of the English language. But what I was really intrigued with is that when you are talking about patriarchy, you don't discuss the situation mostly as it is in the East Asian countries or Asian countries. You're talking about the ancient philosophers, you're talking about Socrates, and you're talking about Plato, and how even in those times, man was the wage earner and he looked after the family, and the woman was the one who got pregnant and she bore all these children. But now you see in Pakistan, the roles are reversed. You haven't talked about the situation as it prevails today. The men stay at home and they don't even look
Wonderful,
after
that's
the children.
equality for you.
They don't
you
look
see,
after the children, and the women are the wage earners. They go out and they earn even in the days of COVID.
But you see, to me, equality is men and women both having the opportunity to either go out to work or to stay at home. Why shouldn't men have that opportunity? If we want equality, then we should also be able to give men that opportunity. Now, what I tried to do in the book is use Eastern philosophers as much as I could. So I've quoted from Rumi, and my chapter on children is taken entirely from a poem by Khalil Gibran called Your Children Are Not Your Children. Because when I come to Pakistan, I realized that anybody who speaks English is seen as a liberal, and liberal is almost a swear word in Pakistan. And I didn't want to be accused of being a liberal. That's why I was very careful not to write the book as if I'm preaching Western ideals. That's why I took a lot from Eastern philosophy. Even at the back of the book, I've got a quote from Rumi: "Love is the energizing elixir of the universe." the cause and effect of all harmony.
This
and
is one thing I have to admire about the book. It's very objectively. You don't take any sides with anybody, either with men or with women, or with Eastern women or Western women. In fact, when you discuss patriarchy, you talk about witchcraft as the first thing that happened, and that specifically happened in Europe. And then you talk about infanticide and how the boys were killed, but not primarily in this part of the world, other parts of the world also. And then the abortion of females, particularly when it was found out what
female
the
fetuses.
Gender of the child, and also honor killings and female genital mutilation, which is not something which is endemic to this part of the world primarily. So you have discussed all these parts of the world and the things that happen. Child marriage, that is something that I think that we have a lot of, but it also has been happening in other places. And you talk about this prostitution and how women are trafficked, and mostly from Eastern Europe. This came to me as a surprise, because I thought that it was mostly this part of the world where women were abducted and...
In Europe, it's like that. It's very much like that.
It seems to happen more from Eastern Europe, from what I can see in the book.
So I've put issues in there, but I've also put a lot of romance. Aitzaz, did you have a chance to look at my chapter on phylogeny? If I could just say, phylogeny is the opposite of misogyny. Phylogeny means men who love women. And I've given some examples.
You've given some examples, and I thought that chapter was going to contain a broader, more general view of the thinking and thought of, and the philosophy and the urge behind phylogeny as a whole. You have in that chapter, I have a caveat, spoken of certain personalities.
Yes.
It's not a chapter on general, broad aspects of phylogeny, but there is, for instance, Shah Jahan, there is
King Edward.
King Edward,
who left his throne for a woman.
Who left his kingdom, his crown, and went with Wallace Simpson. Now these are individuals. I didn't quite see what point you wanted to make out of phylogeny, except that there are men who will give up everything for a woman.
Yes, because you see, a lot of women don't believe that there are men like that, because there are fewer men like that now. So I gave examples from history and said that it is possible for men to be like that. There have been plenty of men like that. And what I tried to do, you have to remember I'm a barrister. So I write with examples. I have to have evidence. I can't write terms in abstract. So I wanted to use an example from every part of the subcontinent. So from the Pakistani perspective, I have included a comedian called Rangila. Now, to me, Rangila was an incredibly creative man because he made a film called Aurat Raj, where he took the Maula Jat of the time, whose name I think was Sultan Rahi, and the chocolate hero Wahid Murad. And Rangila in this film shows that there is some sort of a chemical reaction, and the women take the men's role, and the men take the women's role. And this whole film is about how the men behave when they become effeminate. And he has even shown an item number picturized on Sultan Rahi and Wahid Murad, a bit like Katrina Kaif would do today. And I find that incredible that he thought of tackling this issue cinematically in that way. So the chapter includes real examples because I wanted to use real people rather than abstract terms. Now, you see, there are so many books being written about issues. There are so many books being written about women's rights. There are so many books being written about the law. I have included one chapter on the law because being a barrister, I'm very interested in the legal system of various countries. And I was astonished. This book was also a learning experience for me because I wanted to make it very research-based rather than just talking out of the top of my head. So I was fascinated by a lot of the things that I found. For example, I found that in India, in Bhopal at one time, that part of India was ruled by women for 100 years. They were called the Nawab Begums of Bhopal. So I used them as real role models of feminism. I've also included Mohtarma Fatma Jinnah as a role model in my chapter on feminism, because whilst the country knows her as the Qaid sister, even in London, when I mentioned this, a lot of people didn't know that she was a qualified dentist and she ran her own dentistry practice in Bombay for 7 years. And this was in 1905. And to me, that is feminism. Begum Rana Liaqat lecturing at a university, that's feminism. Feminism is not having a cigarette in your hand and wearing jeans to me at all. But that doesn't mean I'm against wearing jeans or anything else. That is a personal choice. A woman should be able to dress how she wants, totally covered or totally bare. It's her choice, but that should not be confused with feminism. That is my point. And I don't want to judge anybody, men or women. Nasira ji, can I ask you to talk a little bit about the disadvantages that Western women suffered? Because the other thing I didn't want to do in this book was stereotype only Asian women as suffering, and all you ever hear about is honor killing. So I started my chapter on misogyny on the practice of witch burning in Europe, which went on for 300 to 400 years, where women were burnt as witches very publicly, and it took a very long time for them to come out of that. So I've tried to take examples from around the world. Nasir ji, would you like to say something?
I think you have done very well to point out who are the really powerful women who were powerful because they, not that they had any antagonism with men, but because they asserted themselves in their own right, like Ms. Fatma Jinnah and Rana Liaqat Ali, whose example you have given, and then you talked about Sere Mavu Bandra Naike.
That's a chapter on matriarchy.
On matriarchy, yes.
And what I've done in that chapter is that, you know, we go on so much about women being deprived of power. So in that chapter, I've taken all the women leaders in Europe and in the Eastern subcontinent, and I have examined what they actually did for women. And you won't be surprised to hear that they did hardly anything for women. Men did more for women. And I've given examples like Margaret Thatcher, who, as soon as she came into power, she stopped British children's free milk. They used to get free milk in school, which someone else had given, and she took that away. And after that, she was called Thatcher, the milk snatcher.
Well, I think it was quite the reverse here. We had one female leader. And I must say, despite the fact that she didn't really have an outright majority where she could do anything, she did more for the women of Pakistan than Margaret Thatcher, who you called the milk snatcher rightly, and the other woman who now came in for Brexit. Neither of them really did anything. But I think on the contrary, we had this woman leader who really tried her level best to do something for the women with the little mandate that she had, which was not much.
Aitzaz ji, what is your experience of women in powerful positions?
Just to add to what Judge Sahaba has just said, in her first government, the legislation was so impossible for her government. It was so impossible, you can judge, from the fact that Benazir Bhutto's party had only 3 senators in the Senate of Pakistan. So it was impossible to legislate. You had to get a law to be passed by both houses. She managed to get the budget passed because that has to be passed only by the National Assembly. So it was, as Judge Saba has said.
You can use my name, Nasira. We know each other well enough.
I think we've only... Sorry, have you finished?
Go ahead, except that I'm
we both
in
agree
awe
on
of her. So.
Well, between the two of us, we're obviously not going to let you speak that much. But I'm very conscious of the time. We've got 10 minutes left, and I would really like to take some questions, if there are any, please. I'm sure there's a mic somewhere. I hope there's a mic somewhere.
Yeah, there.
By the way, the book is available at Liberty Books outside to buy, and there are only 20 copies.
Somebody's hand is up.
And please say who your question is for.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have the privilege of knowing Barrister Huma Price, as we both live in London and we come across on social occasions. I will be very brief. I don't want to give a lecture. First of all, you threw at the whole audience sitting here the question, what is emotional intelligence, including asking the senior judge, Nasira, Iqbal, and Aitzaz, of course. Well, to me, as a consultant psychiatrist, emotional intelligence is two things: understanding your own emotions and realizing the emotions of people around you, and then handling them, managing them, dealing with them, and that's where I will finish. But coming to your book, if I may pass a comment, as I have seen it, read it, I am not here, Barrister Huma Price, to censor your love letters. Let them reach the destination. Let them reach the target at which they are aimed at. But if you allow me, I will just add a little footnote. And the footnote is what not I am saying, but Margaret Mead has said. She said in her book, The Other Sex, first line, first chapter, women are not born. Women are not born, they are made. When a young girl is born, in her growth, in her nourishment, in her bringing up, we give her little dolls, we give her pink things. When a boy is born, on the other hand, we give him racing cars and pistols, artificial. So the attitude of culture, the attitude of society, the attitude of us in upbringing men and women, and eventually how they develop love for each other depends upon a lot on cultural background, on practicing of various other customs we have. I would finish by defining love for you. You have quoted Khalil Gibran, you have quoted Rumi, you have quoted a lot of poets, but I would like to end with a quotation, and that is Umar Khayyam. He says, "O love, could thou and I with fate conspire to grasp this sorry scheme of things entire, would we not shatter it into bits and remold it nearer to the heart's desire?" Thank you very much. I'm sorry I was a bit long.
I would appreciate a question now, please.
I have a question for Ms. Huma Price. And
Where are you?
I'm here on this side.
Oh, hi.
So basically, radical feminists reject the idea of families because they think that it is the factor that gives birth to patriarchy. And just like you said, that you don't think, but don't you think like it's social conformity that enforces norms and values? And if we talk about being independent, then it depends on what a person thinks what their freedom is. And so does your book enforces the idea that independence depends on the reverse roles of men and women?
Well, in my book, I don't actually promote any ideas, mine or other people's. What I'm trying to do in the book is just explain how things are and let people make their own minds up about it. Because as a barrister, I present my case and I let the judge decide. And like in the same way, I'm letting my readers decide. So I haven't given any of my own conclusions at all. But thank you for your question. Is there any other?
Yes, I'm Maliha Khwaja.
Hi, Maliha.
a great book that you're trying to impart the real life situations that you've seen in courts, and you're promoting love. I think that's great because I'm in education and I feel like telling parents and everyone that what's missing in your child, what is going wrong. So it's a great idea to put it in a book form and let others know with your experience. That's what I would like to do one day with my experience in education. You know, you feel like you're talking to one parent and you want others should hear it also, that this experience has been detrimental to the child's life. So I think you've done a great service by.
Thank you so much. I actually only managed to write the book because there was a lockdown and all the courts in England closed. Otherwise, I'm going from court to court and I would never have the time. I just used the time I had in lockdown to finish the book and I'm so grateful. Yes, sir.
Aitzaz Sahab being the only man on the stage, so my question is for Aitzaz Ahsan Sahab. Do you agree that, anyway, my name is Nawaz. Do you agree that the feelings which are called love, if they are based on experiencing other person's attitude and the way other person treats you, then it can be called love, yes. However, if you become a fan of somebody without experiencing other person's response and attitude, then instead of calling it a love, rather it should be called a fantasy. Thank you. Fantasy, instead of love.
So I take your question to be that if you don't understand the other person's, let's say, hatred for you, and that's his feeling for you, and you still love him, then it's a fantasy. Good one, but I think, quite frankly, this love letters to men and women, it comes and oozes out the message of Khalil Gibran, which is love, and not in the end alone, but throughout. But what I think is also necessary with love for today's world is not just love. It is love and tolerance. Tolerance is the emotion or state of mind which we lack most, I think. Everyone will love somebody or the other. Will love his child, will love his parents, maybe his brothers and sisters, and maybe sometimes his wife also, or her husband, vice versa, the spouse. But supposing you don't love your partner, you've gone through that stage and the underlying emotion that will be most necessary or supposing you don't love a neighbor because you hate his manner, he has music blaring at night, and if you go and tell him, please put down the music, he fights with you. So you can't, there's no way you can love him. But if only he and you could tolerate each other, it would be a different world. If he could tolerate your agony with the loud music and turn it down a bit, not that he loves you, but he tolerates your existence across the wall. Or if you could tolerate loud music and somehow get on with that, it would be a different world. We do not love Hindus, but if we could tolerate them, and if the Hindus could tolerate Muslims, I think tolerance would be a more binding medium and bring more happiness, average state of happiness, than love alone.
Can I just add here that my final chapter is actually called Love, and in that I have gone through all types of love, including love for parents, children, friends, spouses, and also love for the environment. So there's a lot of different types of love. I've also made a distinction between love and lust, also talked about expressing love, and the most important thing in love is forgiveness. And it's very easy to say forgive, but what I have done in the book is I've taken a research by a psychologist who gives us 4 ways of forgiving. You have to go from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. This is a very research-based book. I've tried to bring in people who know more than I do about these things, and I've quoted their research. And the final conclusion of the book actually has a humanist declaration where I have said that you can't sit and wait for the governments or other people to change. Change has to begin with you. And I've given some very, very simple explanations and simple things that each one of us can do every day, like Aitzaz said, tolerate, which would help us to be better people and to bring more love all around ourselves. So I have tried to make it a very simple book, although it's 400 pages. That's because I chose larger font, because I don't like the very small font because it's difficult to read. That's why it went up to 400 pages. But I have tried to go through all the things that are stopping us from loving each other, not only as men and women, but also as human beings. And I have gone over and talked about other communities as well, and what prevents us from loving other communities. It's all in here. And finally, I'd say that my definition of love is when you put another person's happiness before your own happiness. To me, that's what love really is. Thank you very much for coming to this session. Thank you, Nasira ji. Thank you, Aitzaz ji. Thank you very much for being part of my session.
My message would remain, whether you love your neighbor or not, tolerate him.
Very good. Nasira, do you have a message? Do you have a message?
No, I was just going to add that compassion, forgiveness are the 2 most important things, and they come within toleration. And all these 3 things have to be there. And I wish we could tell our leaders, I think the time has come for women to take over and see whether maybe we could do a better job.
If we can follow Jacinda Ardern,
yes,
we may be able to.
Definitely we would be.
She is one of the best leaders the world has ever had. Thank you so much to both of you. I'm really honored. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm sorry. Here. This side.
Hiya.
Assalamu alaikum and greetings to all of you. It's a comment, and then you can actually, go further if you have some time. You actually said one of the words which was really confusing for Dr. Nasira. It was phylogeny, right? Phylogeny. I must say that you've been talking about 2 major, titles, which is feminists and chauvinism. So you have again titled men or the category of women, which is like, or they are liked by, somebody in a positive way. So don't you think that you again compartmentalize the women in another, word? So what do you think about that?
Avoided compartmentalizing anybody. And the problem is you can't pick up isolated things. You've got to read the whole book to actually understand what I'm saying. Thank you very much. I think that's the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you.